Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Vantage Points. I am Hisham Al Maligi. I have another treat tonight. My dear sister Warda Khalid, the founder of Polygon. Let me bring her in studio and start right away. Assalamu alaikum, Warda.
Alaikum salam. How are you?
Welcome. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks for
And
having me. I'm excited to be
awesome.
here.
So, you're the founder of Polygon. What is
Yeah.
Polygon?
What is Polygon? Polygon is a national nonprofit organization that is dedicated to amplifying Muslim voices in Congress. And basically, the idea is to get our community more engaged. We do this with trainings, education, direct advocacy on the Hill. And we launched in January 2017 and have been going ever since.
Excellent. So, is there any other similar organization doing similar work to Polygon?
There are quite a few organizations, both Muslim and non-Muslim, that include advocacy as part of their work. Out of Muslim organizations, though, we are the only one that focuses on Congress exclusively. And sorry, I'm getting notifications. We're the only one that focuses on Congress exclusively. And so that, there really was kind of a missing piece when it came to Muslim American advocacy, and Polygon helped fill that need.
So your activity is focused on Capitol Hill,
Yes.
the House and the
Yes.
Senate.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So before we delve deeper, let's take a step back and talk about you. Tell us more about you, who you are, where you're from, and the whole deal.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Warda Khalid, as you said. I'm originally from Texas, the Houston, Texas area. And I actually started my career in accounting and switched careers. I was working as a certified public accountant, a CPA, in a Big Four public accounting firm in Houston. And in the meantime, I had this desire to go out and work on policy. I had known that I wanted to do that since even like right before I started college, but I didn't really know anybody to guide me on like how to get there or what positions were available. I was considering law school because I thought maybe that could help me. And so while I was working in Houston in accounting, I started helping and volunteering with local civic engagement organizations, including CARE Houston. I was active with MPAC, which is the Muslim Public Affairs Council. I was one of their I went to a Young Leaders Summit with them. I also started a religion blog for the Houston Chronicle called Young American Muslim, where I talked about my experiences living as a Muslim in Texas. And all of this was happening around the time when Islamophobia was really ramping up around President Obama's election. And I was fortunate in that I didn't really feel any backlash after 9/11, but I did start to see its effects after during President Obama's election, where people were talking about the Ground Zero Mosque. There were people like Pamela Geller and Robert Spencer, whose careers seemed to be vilifying Muslims. There was the Peter King hearings. He was a member of Congress that did hearings on homegrown terrorism focused on Muslims. And so all of this really made me feel the urgency for somebody with, who's somebody who has grown up, was born and raised in the US, to be able to build a better future for not only our community, but also our government, because I was understanding that the way that our government was dealing with Muslim countries abroad, such as, the invasion in Afghanistan, the Iraq War, was impacting not only Muslims and non-Muslims living in Middle Eastern countries, but also community members here in the US. And so that's why I decided to learn about foreign policy. So I went back to school, got a second master's degree in international affairs at Columbia University, focusing on human rights and humanitarian studies, along with Middle East studies. And while I was there, I got to do several internships with the United Nations, and also went to Jordan after I graduated to do more language study there, and also another internship with the United Nations, and got to work directly at a refugee camp, Palestinian refugee camp there. And so I was able to bring back that experience when I came back to the United States, did some consulting work in Houston, and then right after that moved to DC, where I worked at a faith-based organization called the Friends Committee on National Legislation, and they are a Quaker lobby. And so I don't know if people know about Quakers, but they're a smaller Christian group less than 75,000 people in the US, but they have immense lobbying power that they do on Capitol Hill and with the administration, back when we had access to the administration. And I was really inspired by that. And I knew even before I started that fellowship that I wanted to start something like Polygon for the Muslim community, because our community was anywhere from 3 to 8 million people, and we didn't have something like that that helped teach us how to advocate and was actively advocating on our behalf on so many issues that our community cares about, whether foreign or domestic. So that's how the idea of Polygon came to be. That's how I came to DC, and have been working in the international peace and security space since then, working on refugees and immigration advocacy. I just finished a 1-year fellowship on Capitol Hill, which was a really great experience. And also moved back to Texas for a year, where I did some consulting work and wrote about the 2016 elections from a US perspective for international audiences, which was really great, and started Polygon while I was there. So it's been a good, interesting journey for sure. And I'm really just happy that our community has accepted the organization, or those that learn about it are excited about the work.
MashaAllah, what an amazing journey.
Yeah.
And so what is your first master's in?
Accounting.
In accounting, okay.
Yeah.
So and then you got the CPA designation. Very good.
Yep.
So let's talk about the name. What is Polygon? What does it mean?
Yeah, Polygon, we were trying to think of a strong name that didn't have like Muslim, whatever in the title, or Islam, because there's so many organizations that look like that, or that have that kind of name, that we wanted it to stand out. So Polygon, we originally, it's actually spelled Polygon, and it's like a shape. It's the name of a shape that has a certain number of sides, or I don't know if it has a certain number of sides. I'll have to look it up. But the idea was that the sides of the shape are, you could use them to build. And so originally the tagline we were thinking of was connecting people, policy, and progress. And then later on decided to change the Y to I to stand for like POLI, like politics or policy, which is what we focus on. So it's just a, interesting, strong name that, hopefully encapsulates what we're trying to do. And that's really build power through education and training and advocacy.
So you decided to go against the first name, which is ROFIA, Representatives of Jihad in America.
That actually never came across the table.
I just made that up.
That would have been really funny.
But I mean, like, it's unfortunate that we have to stay away from certain, to avoid certain connections in the minds of people.
Oh, I mean, it wasn't like that for us. I mean, everywhere in our logo, it says like amplifying Muslim American voices in Congress. Right. It was just that we wanted something different that just didn't have, because there's so many organizations that have the, Islam or Muslim in the thing. And we were trying to do something very like cutting edge. And so we wanted just a different name that you could just only identify with our organization.
That's very good. Very good. Thank you. So you mentioned the Polygon started in 2017. And I remember when we were at the Amicly Summit in California, you were still in the process of establishing it. So tell me about this process. Like, who makes up like the membership of Polygon? How does Polygon work? Where do you get your funding?
Yeah. So we're a 501c3 nonpartisan nonprofit organization. So we don't endorse candidates. We can't be super like political in like endorsing candidates or anything like that. But we are able to educate, which is basically what that's why our name is Polygon Education Fund. The idea was to establish a 501c4 alongside it, so that we could lobby on issues that are important to the community. But we quickly realized that the community doesn't, a lot of community members don't know how to advocate or how to lobby. And so right now our mission really is education focused. We can do some advocacy because we have a 501h election, but the majority of our work is education. And so that's kind of how it came to be. I mean, I modeled it after the Quaker organization that I was working at. They have a 501c3 and a 501c4. While I was there, I was working at the 501c3, so I was really able to see how much lobbying work we could do under that. How did the employees denote their times to see how much of, they're doing it for the lobby, how much they're doing it for educational purposes. So it was a really good learning experience for me to just see firsthand how they operated. And one interesting thing that I saw was they worked through their meeting houses. That's what they call their churches. And so their meeting houses had membership with them, and it was like natural places for them to find supporters or people to advocate on issues. And I would love for our mosques to do something similar to that, where, we have this membership and then we add civic engagement. And so we have been working actually with other Muslim civic engagement organizations to release a faith-based toolkit for Muslims on why it's important to be civically engaged and why our religion encourages it, as well as other items like Muslim poll to poll the community on what issues are important to them. So that's kind of how we work. We don't have like a membership where you have to pay to be a part of it or anything like that. We're not a PAC. It's really just kind of open. One of our goals was to be really grassroots focused, and right now our trainings are the way that we reach the grassroots. Inshallah, I hope that once we grow and have more resources, we'll be able to have like a grassroots coordinator to go out to communities and start building these advocacy teams, so that when something does happen, people are ready to mobilize and reach out to their member of Congress. One thing that I like to share is that even though we focus on Congress, a lot of the skills that we teach can be used with your local representative, your state representative. It's all kind of the same process of knowing how to speak about an issue, how to follow up, how to ask for something specific. These are all things that people can learn from our trainings. So I think, go ahead.
Sorry, speak about those trainings. Like, how can people get this?
Yeah, so if you go to our website, we have a training page that describes the 2 different trainings that we offer. One of them is our Congressional Advocacy 101 training, and that is like the most requested one. And that goes through the basics of what is Congress, why is it important to engage, how do people engage, what are the different kind of pressure levers that members of Congress have on them when it comes to making a decision. And then we do live simulations. Right now it's all on web because of coronavirus, but normally we're doing it in person. And we walk through live simulations of how do you actually do an office visit with a member of Congress? How do you do a phone call with a member of Congress? How do you do a town hall meeting? These are all opportunities for constituents to hold their member accountable or to ask them questions about policies that are important to them. And so we teach people and we practice with them so that when they actually do it, it's not the first time that they're doing it. They've actually practiced with us and they know how to do it. And so it's really helpful. And most of the people that go through our training, in fact, I think probably all of the ones that we've surveyed have said that they have drastically improved their understanding of how the advocacy process works and feel a lot more confident about doing it.
Is this the website, polygonnational.org?
Yeah.
Okay. So if I want to get this training, I can just go to the website and like it's something you can do it online, or you have to attend?
You have to email us to set it up. So right now with coronavirus, our trainings are 100% virtual. So you can go there and see the different types of trainings. The other training that we have on there is the 201 training, which is a more advanced one. And the tagline is, so you've met with your member of Congress, now what? Right? So it's like, what is the next step? How do you track legislation? How do you form coalitions to push a bill through? How do you write an op-ed or create a toolkit for people to be able to help engage and create a media narrative around the issue? So you would pick one of those trainings and then you can email us to ask us to give that training to your community group or your mosque or whoever wants to receive that training.
And is there a fee connected to that, or?
It depends on the organization's budget. So some trainings we will do for free if our organization just doesn't have enough budget. The rest is on a sliding scale, depending on their budget.
Okay, sounds good. So I mean, I've been involved in activism and politics for a while, and I still need this training or refreshers every now and then. So it's really important for everybody to be aware of this. And like we
actually hold webinars that are open to the public too, where we just give the training. So the next one you should sign up.
Definitely will do. Thank you. Okay, so about the Quakers, you mentioned there are only 75,000 in the United
Yeah,
States?
in the US. There's more abroad.
Right. So, and they have a lobbying arm or like an
Yes.
organization that focuses on Capitol
Yes.
Hill.
Yes.
If that tells something, then like how important such an organization is, of course, Polygon as well for the Muslim community. We're about roughly 3 million, and up to 10 million at the like the maximum numbers, but the census doesn't have a religious question, so we
Right.
don't know for sure. So
Right.
yeah. So now this organization, the Quakers, what were like, if you're at liberty to share something about how they used to work and what their issues,
Hmm.
for example, yeah, so we can educate the audience about that.
Yeah, sure. So I worked on the Middle East team there. So one thing you should know about Quakers is they're pacifists. So they're completely anti-war.
Mhm.
And so my job was to work on non-military solutions to conflicts that were taking place in the Middle East. So I worked on things like the Iran nuclear deal, which was happening at the time, working with the administration and Congress, and interfaith groups and just broad progressive foreign policy folks to be able to push the Iran deal through, because the idea was that it would help avert nuclear power there. It would help avert a potential war there. And so that's why the Quakers were interested in working on the issue. Same thing with the Syria conflict, the humanitarian issues that were taking place there, Israel Palestine as well. I actually got to go to Gaza, and the West Bank and Israel while I was working with them, and see 1 year after the 2014 Gaza war what had happened. Had they rebuilt? And most of the homes had not been rebuilt. And so being able to see what particular challenges they were facing to rebuilding, what were kind of the humanitarian conditions on the ground, and brought that back and did a congressional briefing, visited the National Security Council staff and had a meeting with them about it. So that's kind of how they operate, where they are not only working on Capitol Hill, but also like with the administration and other players, who work in the policy making process. And if you have any lived on the ground experience, it helps to come back and share pictures and tell firsthand stories, because it makes it all the more powerful. So that was what I was in particular doing. But they also work on other things like climate change, Native American rights, criminal justice reform, um, let's see, national security. I mean, every issue you can think of, domestic and foreign, they're working on it, which is great. And I would hope that one day our organization, inshallah, can do so as well when we have enough resources to do so.
Inshallah, this is amazing.
Yeah,
I can't wrap my head around that 75,000 people and they have such an organization.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
They
it's
had like
amazing.
40 staff when I was there, and I think they outgrew their office by the time after I left. So
Wow.
they're doing great work.
I'm really impressed and looking forward to Polygon becoming bigger and
Inshallah.
better, inshallah. So, what are the issues that you have focused on so far
Yeah.
in your work?
So far we focus on three key areas. So we do social, racial, and economic justice issues, civil rights, and Islamophobia. And I think a lot of organizations in our space focus on Islamophobia, like Muslim travel ban. But we work on that too, and that falls into the civil rights issues as well that our community faces, kind of like the direct violation of our rights, whether it's like the surveillance or the Patriot Act. So many other things impact our community. But the economic justice issue, I think, is something unique that we kind of do. And there's only a few other Muslim organizations that focus on it, like from a national level. And so they're actually like, when we do a lot of work with interfaith coalitions on this work. And we're often either like one of a few or the only Muslim organization working on these things. And what I'm talking about is like poverty, hunger alleviation, food stamps and SNAP benefits for underprivileged families, taxes. Just at the coronavirus, we've been really, really active on that, and actually created like a COVID-19 policy update center on our website where people could kind of follow what's happening, because so many things are moving, and then the Senate is doing one thing and the House is doing one thing, and we don't know what's happening. So we have like a whole update center, and made a cute little video also to show how it's all interconnected with like the Black Lives Matter movement and the healthcare issues that we have in our country. So we really see our work as fitting into kind of a holistic approach of trying to improve the society that we live in, as well as the policies, because they're all interconnected. So those are kind of the issues that we've been focusing on most. We also did some work around immigration. We do a lot of civic engagement, GOTV, get off the vote work in coalition. So those items are probably our top priorities.
Excellent. So later on in the program, I'm going to ask you about your personal view of the current politics, and you will speak, of course, on your personal behalf, not on behalf of the organization, but continuing still to learn about Polygon and what it does. So give me an example of a visit, for example, to an office on Capitol Hill. What is entailed? Let's use this chance to educate the widest possible audience on such an issue.
That's a really good question. So the first thing that we would have to do is set up the meeting with the staffer or the member of Congress, depending on who's available and who actually works on that particular issue area. So one thing you want to make sure you do when you're meeting with them is ask for the staffer that works on that portfolio. Staffers on the Hill have many portfolios. One staffer may have a dozen or more issues that are under their purview. So you want to make sure you find the right person, because the worst thing is if you go into a meeting and that person doesn't work on that issue and you just wasted half an hour or 15 minutes or however long you sat with them. So setting up the meeting is the most important thing. Often in our work, we do it with our interfaith partners. So they might set up the meeting, or we might set up the meeting, and then we invite other people to join us and vice versa. So we're often going in coalition. That's kind of what it means to go in coalition. It's like, it's not just Polygon going alone. It's like, okay, we have, we represent some Muslim voices, and there's other people that represent some Christian voices, Jewish voices, or whatever particular denomination they are. To show
you agree on this issue that you're going.
Yeah, that we all agree on this issue, and we want you to make a change. So it really depends on what issue you're talking about. Like for the Muslim travel ban, those coalitions they have a different makeup. You have people working on immigration issues, refugee issues. You have people working on civil rights, religious freedom. So that those kinds of visits might be different. It's not just Muslim groups. So that's kind of the first step, is like setting up the meeting. And then when you go into a meeting, and we cover this in our training, like you want to have somebody that kind of does the introductions and lays out what the meeting is about and what you're here to ask for. I tell people to kind of give maybe a little bit personal information about themselves, about like why they felt compelled to come to this meeting, why are they advocating, are they a member of the community? Like one thing that members of Congress really want to know is that they are talking to constituents, and that's somebody that is in their district. Because if you're not in their district, they really don't have to answer to you, because you're not a voter or a donor. So you want to make sure that you have at least somebody in the meeting that is a constituent. And that's kind of an opportunity then for the staffer or the member of Congress to answer your questions and tell you where they stand on a certain issue. So are they going to support a bill? Are they going to oppose a bill? Are they still thinking about it? That's a good time to ask them questions and hold them accountable. So at the end, you afterwards, you thank them for their time. You get the staffer's contact information. You make sure that somebody follows up after the meeting to make sure that whatever you discussed actually gets done, or if they ask for follow-up information, you actually provide it. And that's kind of what a basic visit is. And then you kind of see how things go and then move on from there.
Excellent. So is it important to meet the elected official themselves, or it's okay to meet a staffer?
It's 100% okay to meet a staffer. In fact, you're probably more likely to meet a staffer. It's really difficult to get on a member of Congress's schedule. They have, when things are normal and they're here working on the Hill, they're so busy. They have so many meetings every day, and then they have to vote in the, at different times during the day. And sometimes those votes go late into the evening. So more likely than not, you're probably going to meet with a staffer. That's not to say that sometimes members do meet with groups. Like, for instance, if somebody from their district came all the way to DC, they try to meet with them in person. You usually will only get 15 minutes with them, but it's still like some amount of time that you can get. Right. But it's totally fine, yes, to meet with a staffer.
And as you mentioned, it is usually the case because they have to raise money. And I'm going to tell you this story. A former congressman in my district, in a meeting, told us, like, basically, from the moment I am elected, I have to raise $20,000 every week
Oh
in
my
order to
gosh.
be re-elected.
Yeah, they have to
So,
spend their time on the phone. It's called call times, where they have to like try to get donations.
right.
Um, I mean, that's part, I mean, it's a double-edged sword, right? Like on one hand, yes, their time is divided, but also members of Congress or members in the House of Representatives are reelected every 2 years. So they're
Mhm.
always kind of worrying about it, and it's harder to get them to do riskier things that might risk their seat. Whereas in the Senate, they're there for 6 years, so they have a little bit more time and leeway to
Right.
like build up like support for something that might be trickier.
It slipped my mind, and I don't know if you know. Is it stated in the Constitution the number of years?
I don't know if it's in the Constitution. It actually might be.
I
But yeah,
think it
it's two
is.
years for in the House of Representatives and 6 in the Senate.
Right. I mean, again, from the moment elected, not from the moment taking office. There's a couple of
Yeah,
months still until
yeah,
taking office. $20,000 a week, and this is when this was said in 2010.
yeah,
Probably more now than $20,000.
yeah. I definitely have seen that. I've seen, members of Congress will hold fundraisers after they're elected and before they even took office because they're like, we're already worried about reelection. Like
Right.
it's a very real thing for them. Yeah.
So speaking about the money issues in politics, let's answer this question for me. What is the motivation for an elected official, let's say a congressperson, to accept, to support your position as an activist or like a lobbyist? What is the motivation for the elected official to do such thing?
I think the best motivation is if a member of Congress actually agrees with your position.
Mm-hmm.
That is the easiest person to move. And we call them, in the advocate space, we call them champions. So these are people that we always know are going to support certain issues, or they really feel invested in an issue, or they're very passionate about an issue. Those are the easiest people to move. Because for them, it's like a no-brainer. It's like, oh yeah, there's like a gun safety bill, I'll sign on to that, or a civil rights bill, sure, no problem. When it comes to more like complex or just maybe like more political or politicized issues, it can be harder to move them. And you're right that the member of Congress has to make a calculation about, is it worth it for me to support it? What will my constituents think? What are other people in the caucuses that I'm a part of doing? What is my party doing? So there's, what are my donors doing or wanting? It's a lot of different, and what is the media saying? I mean, there's so much
Right.
that they have to take into consideration. So, how the incentive then, I think, is to, you would hope that it would be to do the right thing, but it's not always to do the right thing. That would be so easy, right? If it was just
Hasn't
like,
been the case for a while,
I'm
right?
going to do the right thing. And, but it's not, unfortunately, not that easy. That's why you see people like, when the Muslim ban vote happened on the House floor, there were only, I think 2 Republicans that signed on to the bill to like revoke the ban, or it's like, okay, why is it a partisan issue to not discriminate based on religion, right? Like that shouldn't be a partisan issue.
Right.
But it's, because of all those factors, they have to think about it and then weigh those and decide, what is it worth for them to actually vote yes or no on something.
I'll tell you another story. Another congressman from my district, from the other party, told us in a meeting about 3 years after that first meeting I told you about, that the issue of immigration, well, the first was a Democrat, the second is a Republican, because you're going to understand from the context. The Republicans are holding immigration, and this was about a path to naturalization, if you remember that, during the time of Obama.
Yeah.
So he said that the Republicans are holding the immigration issue hostage in order to get something else that they want from the Democrats. So they do this to each other. It's not necessarily that they're against this or for that.
Yeah.
But so what do you know about that? Tell us more.
I think we've been seeing that a lot with the coronavirus packages too, where it's like, even like Trump will flip flop on things where he's like, okay, we want to make a big deal. And then other people are like, and then later he'll be like, no, not a big deal. And then you have members of the party saying different things. It shows how much political calculation goes into it. And that's sad because then it's the American people that suffer from these lack of movement on policies,
right.
Or maybe movement in the wrong direction. So I mean, unfortunately, that's how the game is played. And I think that people right now, with the elections coming up, they're trying to get people civically engaged and get them out to vote because they're trying to explain to them how much, your elected representatives at whichever level of government will impact their daily lives. And it's important to have people that represent you in office, no matter what party they are. So I think that's one thing that people can do about it, is just like be really like pay attention to who are you voting into office, pay attention to who your member is. And if you can't get them to move on an issue, then look at your other options.
So let's talk about what an elected or a candidate for office need to be in office and remain in office. I summarized it to three things: the money in order to get pay for advertisement and mailings and volunteers and stuff. And then the third thing is ultimately you need the votes.
Mm-hmm.
So money, volunteers, and votes.
Yeah.
Ultimately it is the votes. So what is the number one thing that scares an elected official into doing what you want him to do?
I would hope, and this is me being an optimist, that it's votes, because at the end of the day, that's how people, I always tell people, your members of Congress are accountable to you. And that's the way you hold them accountable, is by voting for them or not voting for them. Right. Obviously, money plays a big role. And if you look at other advocacy organizations, they talk about, even Polygon works on, we're in a Defending Democracy Coalition, where part of it is getting corporate money and things out of politics, because it doesn't have an even playing field for people, where they can't compete with corporations or like huge super donors or, that have all this money and can swing an election. And so I think that's why it's so important for people to get civically engaged, to remind the system or, whoever it is, that at the end of the day, it's supposed to be a democracy, and a democracy is supposed to be determined by people and not money or these external factors. It should really be about finding people that represent your interests or represent your views the best. Obviously, nobody's 100% going to match you. That's, we're all different people. We're all going to have different views on things, but you want to find a representative that at least represents you enough to where you feel comfortable voting for them.
So Polygon is an organization that's trying to help educate and support Muslim issues, educate elected officials and educate Muslims on how to engage with elected officials. So our issues are not hot cakes in Congress on Capitol Hill. So whether it's Islamophobia, whether it's foreign wars, whether it's national security, or even, of course, the original topic of Israel-Palestine. How do you tackle these issues? First of all, do you tackle the issue at all of Israel-Palestine in your work?
No, we work on domestic issues, and that's, I'll tell you why we did that. We originally, when we launched, we looked at a study by the Society or Institute of Social Policy and Understanding, ISPU. Mm-hmm. And there, every year they rank like what are the top issues of concern to American Muslims. Mm-hmm. And within that, we found that they were very much matching what Americans of non-Muslim backgrounds also cared about. It was healthcare, it was jobs, the economy. I think national security was up there somewhat. Mm-hmm. But those are the issues that we focus on too. That's why we decided to focus on domestic issues first. Obviously, foreign policy is important to our community. Many members of our community are immigrants, and so they, pay attention to what's happening abroad. I don't know if one day we'll expand into that, but as of now, we have enough to keep us busy in the domestic front, and that's what we're focusing on.
There's a lot of work
Yeah,
that is needed. Like you have your plate full anyway.
exactly.
And there are other organizations that are working on other issues that you're not working on.
Yeah, and I think it's important to make sure that we're not redoing work just under our name. I think that's very important that, that's why we stay so focused on Congress, because it's like, this is like this is what we don't want to do mission creep. We don't want to redo any work just to have it under our name. We don't care about that. We're very much focused on the work.
Right. I mean, not that you don't care, but it's not your mission. It's not your focus.
Yeah, right. Like, in our personal capacity, I mean, outside of Polygon, I do foreign affairs and national security work. Like, that's my personal career. But Polygon is an institution. We're focusing on domestic.
Right. Okay. So in the what is the toughest issue that you faced so far in working with the members of the Hill on?
I think the toughest so far has been the Muslim travel ban. I think that was a multi-year campaign that we worked on since day one when we launched in 2017. President Trump came out with it shortly after he took office. I think it was the next day, January 27th. And it wasn't until July of this year that we finally got the House to pass a bill asking for it to be revoked, and preventing a future such bill from being implemented. And right now that it's not passing in the Senate because right now the Republicans are in majority, and so they see it very much as a marker bill that they're hoping that if the Senate flips, then we can get it passed, which is sad to me because, again, this is, what I talk about, doing the right thing, where I think it should be okay for anybody of any party to say that religious discrimination is not okay. But, we had to work really hard to get that bill passed. Like, that was a lot of coalition work. It was a lot of advocating with members of Congress, educating them on how people were impacted. So my last job I personally worked on was on refugee and immigration issues and how they were impacted by the ban. Polygon was just working to uplift all these stories that were coming out about people being impacted by the ban, and then also working on writing the language for the bill, and then, advocating with members of Congress to get it passed. So everybody did a lot of work to get it done. And, it took us, 3.5 years. I mean, the legislation didn't even come out till I think last year. So we had to first work to write the legislation and get a coalition enough together to work on it.
I'll tell you what, let's take time and delineate this process. You started working right after the executive order of the president.
Yes.
This is news to me.
Yeah, so right after the executive order came out on January 27th, and there were multiple iterations of the ban too, by the way. First one had 100% refugee ban, and then the next one moved it to I think 90 days or something like that, and added additional countries. And then there was a third version, which the Supreme Court upheld, and that's the version that we have on the books. So after each of these came out, Polygon's role, again, being kind of the policy wonk people that we are, we came out with different resources that were okay, here are the countries that are included in the ban. Here's what it's saying about them. This is what's happening. So it was a lot of education for our community. And then at the same time, working in coalition to decide okay, what are we going to do about this? We need to come up with legislation. Are we going to ask Congress to withhold the money for the ban because Congress controls the purse strings? So we had to figure out a strategy of how are we going to oppose this. And then, eventually we found some champions in the House and Senate. On the Senate side, it was Senator Coons' office. On the House side, it was Congresswoman Judy Chu's office. And all these coalition partners would meet with among themselves to think about language, and then meet with their offices to kind of walk through what could potential language be. So within the bill, it has provisions about you can't ban an entire or anybody based on their religion to come in. It was amending the Immigration and Nationality Act, actually, because technically that's how the legislation works, because that's what President Trump used to justify his ban. So it was talking about how the Immigration and Nationality Act can't be used to deny people based on their ethnicity. It can't be denied based on their religion. And so then it had language along those lines, and kind of describing that in more detail. And then after the bill, like we were okay with the text, then the members of Congress introduce the bills into their respective chambers. So Congresswoman Chu would do it in the House, Senator Coons would do it in the Senate. So if you look at congress.gov, you can see the date that the legislation about the ban was introduced. And then after that, it is about collecting co-sponsors. So co-sponsors means you want members of Congress, other than the original introducers or the original co-sponsors, they call it, to sign on and support it. And that basically signals to House and Senate leadership that, hey, if I get enough people on this bill, that means that I need to bring it to the floor to have a vote. And that process took a very long time to collect enough co-sponsors. I think by the end, we had almost all Democrats, almost all of them on the bill. And that was a challenge in and of itself. You would think that, oh, the Democratic Party is like progressive. No, there are still not. This is the thing when people assume like party is not everything. You have to look at each individual member by themselves. They might be like there's blue dog coalitions where they're more conservative Democrats. There's frontliners. Like there's all these different kind of terms to describe the kind of member of Congress they are. So you have to like meet with each of them and see people who have relationships with them, if they can kind of convince them based on the lens they're looking through. Like one thing was that national security experts, many of them came out and said that this ban actually makes our country less safe because we are, basically kind of like, not attacking, but I guess like opposing these countries or like these people from their countries from coming, which is not a good look. So working with each of these members to get co-sponsors. And then once we got enough signatures, then, you start having conversations with the House leadership of like, when can you bring this bill to a vote? When can we actually vote?
Enough signatures? What's the number?
I think it really depends on the political moment. Some bills get brought to the floor very quickly with barely any signatures on it because the political moment just called for it. So for instance, like the Justice and Policing Act about George Floyd was introduced very quickly, I think because the political moment was there. I don't know how many co-sponsors it had before it was introduced, but I know after it was introduced, it had a lot. But yeah, sometimes you can just introduce things if the moment is right. So
you didn't have any Republicans on co-sponsor?
No Republicans co-sponsored it.
Not even like at the time, Justin Amash was still Republican, I believe, but he's now independent.
Yeah,
and he's very supportive.
I don't believe he was one of the co-sponsors. I mean, even us, one of my last fellow at Polygon, she had a Republican member of Congress that she went and spoke with, and he was retiring, and so he was like, "Yeah, I'll sign on to it," and he never signed on. We were like, "We wanted you to be our first Republican to sign on to this." So there's challenges when you're doing it, and then finally came to a floor vote, and then there's kind of legislative specifications within that. You're voting on like an amendment and then the bill, so it's kind of like technical. And then so you can go now and see in the record who voted for it, who opposed it, and who abstained. And that's kind of what happens.
So let me ask this. I remember I follow Justin Amash because of his courageous step of like separating from the Republican Party in opposition to the state that it's in now, especially with Trump as president. And he is one of the main people who are exposing how Congress is really working from inside. So one of the things that he said is, it's now about 40 years that we haven't been able to bring amendments to bills from the floor. Like it's take it or leave it. It comes from the Speaker's office, and that's that. Is this your experience?
I can't speak directly to the amendments. I will say that it's very automated and very much on party lines is what I see a lot. I think a lot of amendments I have seen, they are brought up when it comes to the National Defense Authorization Act and the NDA, which is a bill that gets passed every year. So amendments are really important there, and some of them are included. So I'm not sure what he's referring to specifically in his comments, but I think it really depends on the bill. Is it a vehicle that has to be moved every year? Because then people do try to add amendments. I mean, one time I remember, I think it was the NDA, maybe 2017, 2018, and somebody put one in there to designate Islamic Relief worldwide as a terrorist organization. So
Mhm.
it matters. Um,
That was
but,
voted down, hopefully.
huh?
That was voted down, hopefully.
Yeah, the number actually didn't show up
Oh,
to
wow.
like further it, which was great. But yeah, we had a big interfaith coalition like oppose that, and
Hmm.
it was a good example of like how different groups can work together to achieve a common goal.
Right.
Because one day you're telling them that they're a terrorist organization, the next day it's some other faith group that's being called that.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, but
I'm
I do
thinking,
notice it's very automated, very much among party lines, and I don't see a lot of like free thinking. It's more like, okay, what's the party doing? That's not to say members don't act like we have seen bills where it's not on party lines, or these are the ones that make headlines that like the squad opposed, this bill, which a lot of their party passed or something like that. So I
right.
mean, it happens, but a lot of it is along party lines.
So you mentioned the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA. It's basically a bill to spend on the military, more or
Mhm.
less.
Yeah.
Section 270 that was added under Obama time, during Obama's time, is about 260 or 270, something like that. It gives the president, whoever the president is, the right to detain anyone, anywhere, indefinitely, without the right for representation of a lawyer or anything like that. This is, of course, a national security issue. Have you worked on that, or can you provide more information?
I first worked on this when I was sitting in Texas writing my religion blog and talked about the NDAA, and I was shocked to find this out. And I thought this was so un-American that you could just pick somebody up and detain them. Little did I know that that's what happened after 9/11 on the East Coast. I learned about that when I was studying at Columbia and I took a law class on post 9/11 civil rights. And I did, yeah. So I personally have raised awareness about it and, tried to teach people about it. Polygon, since then, I would say we haven't worked directly on it. I think what we've done is I think there were maybe some coalition letters that went out talking about either that provision or it might have been another provision regarding like the Patriot Act or the reauthorization of it, which is like kind of combined in there too. So we might have just like signed on a letter to it, but yeah, we haven't dug deep enough to like work on that specific provision or anything like that.
And
I mean, we're not that much into national security. I would say we're not yet anyway, but I would hope one day we would get to work. Yeah.
this, of course, the guise of terrorism is the purpose of introducing this and including it. It's unfortunate that most people don't understand. Nothing of that sort will be ever limited to the group that it was targeted at in the
Yeah.
beginning. Look at the Patriot Act, for example.
Hmm.
Everybody now is suffering from it.
Yeah.
Warrantless wiretapping and
Right.
the whole
Phone records. Yeah.
right. So an issue like that happened under the watch of a Democratic president. The Democrats at the time did not hold the House or the Senate, but the president could have vetoed it, for example. So, which tells you, like, there are a lot of calculations that go into political decision making. It's not about what is right and what is
Mhm.
constitutional or not, because on face value, this section is completely unconstitutional. I can't even imagine this is the United States of America. You know what I mean? So, anyway, so you got the co-sponsors, you made, or like the Speaker of the House pushed it into a vote, it got the votes. Did it get about the Muslim ban, did it get any Republican support as far as voting for it?
Yeah, I think there were 2 Republican members that voted for it.
Okay, so I know Amash is one of them, but
No, it
only.
wasn't Amash. I
Oh,
think it
really?
was Fitzgerald and Will Hurd. whichever one is in Dallas. I think it's
That's
in
surprising.
Dallas. Yeah.
But
I think
anyways,
Amash abstained, but you can check the record. I don't
okay.
remember. I don't think.
I'm sure it's for another reason, that another section, like it was required. And here's something that he always raises. They dump a bunch of things and it's a one vote, like a bunch of
Mhm.
amendments, and it's a one vote on all of them. It's not that you vote on each one separately, no. So he probably objected to something else. So on principle, he didn't vote for it. That's I'm fond of his way of thinking, but we can debate that another time.
You should check then. I don't know. I
Right,
didn't look into it, but I know I feel like I've read articles where he opposed the ban in general, but
right. His
yeah,
father is
I think it'd be
Palestinian.
interesting to look into why he didn't vote for it.
Right.
Or maybe he did. I don't know because he's independent, so I don't remember. Maybe he did vote for it, and I just was
Okay.
paying attention to Republicans. Yeah.
So it took 3.5 years. You started working right after the executive
Yeah.
order, and it took 3.5 years. And for the audience, this is basically what it takes. And that reminds me of working on a local issue, not on a federal issue, the Muslim holiday campaign in New York City. It took us in the second iteration 7 or 9 years to finish the program and gain the support of an elected official, the mayor, basically, to close the schools on Muslim holidays. So these things take time. Let's go back to a meeting with an elected official or a staffer. And you mentioned that you take constituents because they want to know that there is buy-in. Like I'm either getting the vote or getting donations to support my re-election.
Or I have to answer to this person because they're going to hold me accountable through the
Yeah,
vote or the money, whichever one. But yeah.
I would hope so. At least some of them, but I don't have much faith in the current Congress. And by the way, I think the popularity or so, like it's 10% approval rating of the Congress, but yet they get reelected at 90% rate. Doesn't make sense to me.
So there's a really interesting, I don't know if it was a study or article, but I read it and it said that the majority of members of Congress actually keep their campaign promises. So that might be why. I mean, maybe
Really?
these constituents
On
who
the
voted
local
them.
level, I guess.
Huh?
On the local level, I guess, to the constituents of.
No. Yeah, exactly. Their constituents in their district
Right,
that voted them in.
right,
Yeah. So
right,
I guess statistically speaking,
right.
most of them their constituents would be happier that they did
Right.
what they promised.
Right. Okay, so we have a few minutes remaining. Let's talk now about this coming election. How do you see the makeup shift of the House and the Senate?
So right now, the House, the Democrats are in control of the House, and they are right now. They are hoping to keep control. I mean, the thing about when you have a particular party in power, the reason they want to keep control is because it's easier to pass legislation. So the reason we were able to pass the No Ban Act is because the Democrats had control of the House, and so this is a lot with other legislation. And this is one thing that I noticed while working on the Hill was that the party that's in power is actually a lot busier than the one that's not, because they're trying to use this opportunity to pass all the legislation they can because they know they have the majority and can do it.
Right.
On the Senate side, it's the opposite, where the Republicans are in control, and of course they want to keep on to that. They want to hold on to that, and obviously the other party in both cases would want to flip the way that things are held, right? So that everybody wants their party to be in power. I have not looked at the statistics enough. I've been focusing personally on the presidential race and watching that, and my own member of Congress's race to see which way it could flip. So I don't know the answer to that, and I think I'm going to be like everybody else on election night, just watching and seeing what happens.
So right now the Senate is controlled by the Republicans in a way that give them complete control. Do you know this thing that is called the nuclear?
Yeah, the nuclear option. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell us more about this?
I might mess this up. There's so many terms that they use that are like very specific. I think that is when you don't have to have the 60 votes, or you don't have to have the 2/3 votes to move something forward. I think it's where you only have to have a simple majority,
Simple
so
majority.
51. I think that's what it is.
Right. It's instead of 60, it's just simple majority. 51 would carry the thing. But the Republicans now have, I think, 55 or more seats.
I think something like that. 54,
Okay.
55, yeah.
I mean, I looked into it briefly, and it
Oh.
seems that it's a toss at this point. Basically, it could go either way, but
Either way.
no one definitely will reach the 60 votes. 60 seats in the Senate. But Democrats could gain ground, especially
Yeah.
in Georgia, where the two senators are basically neck to neck with the opposition. So we'll see. Because and the reason I'm bringing this up is we're kind of in a stalemate right now, because whatever passes the House doesn't necessarily pass
Yeah.
the Senate, and vice
Yeah.
versa. So nothing really is moving in the country except the absolute necessity, or
Right.
what both parties agree on, which is basically more taxes, more military, less rights.
Yeah. We did see an effort this year. I have to give props for members that were opposing the giving funding to the Pentagon or giving as much because of coronavirus. And, there's people that are suffering, and we need to be helping them instead of paying for more weapons, and so, yeah, I don't think they were not successful, but it was nice to see the noise.
Very good. And last question: who's winning the presidency?
I cannot comment on that. And I honestly don't even know the answer. I like I said, I'm going to be watching on election night like everybody else. So, yeah, I don't know.
Nice pivot under pressure. All right, this has been fun. Looking forward to more in the future. Thank you for what you do.
Thanks for having me.
And please, everybody, go to polygonnational.org, join the mailing lists, look for the courses, learn the process, and support such organizations that work on our behalf, not only the Muslims, but everybody in the United States, because what's benefiting to Muslims is benefiting to everybody, and vice versa.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Warda. I appreciate you coming, and looking forward to another time soon, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. This has been this episode of Vantage Points with Hisham and Maligi. There are hashtags, and there is a hashtag. This is the hashtag. Take care, America.